Action.
Good.
Alright, so the overall topic of our podcast was how teachers in schools should incorporate maker spaces in the classroom through multimodal communication and how this is beneficial to the students. So first of all, we started our podcast asking all our listeners to draw. Because unlike how most people usually think that when people lecture that they just want to look at the lecture board and concentrate on that, actually it really helps you with focus and remembering things if you're doodling and doing something else when people are actually lecturing on you. So we kind of asked students to draw, so hoping that they would remember a little more of our podcast. So recently, maker culture is becoming a lot bigger, and teachers have been trying to incorporate into the classroom through lesson plans and assignments. And so overall, our main points of this podcast were some of the benefits of maker culture and multimodal communication and how they can be implemented in the classroom. And so some of those benefits are how they make the classroom more engaging and more fun for students, and how it makes it easier for students to concentrate because they're doing hands-on learning through all these maker spaces things. And lastly, that multimodal communication is helpful for students with different brain types. So whether you're an oral learner or a verbal learner, that using multimodal communication, you're still going to get a good learning.
Like Charlotte said, we kind of broke our podcast up into three main points about how maker culture is beneficial to the classroom. And the first point that we discussed was how maker culture engages students in the classroom by incorporating play. And this is evident by doing hands-on activities in the classroom. And hands-on activities increases the overall attentiveness of students, and it increases a better atmosphere in the classroom because everybody's going to be creating and doing and learning. We supported this by using evidence from our own English 1101 class when we sculpted objects out of Play-Doh, and that helped us focus more and learn. And also doodling at the beginning of every class, drawing a picture of ourselves helps us focus in and think about what we're going to be doing in class for the day. And also, whenever we acted out our skit, that also applied to hands-on learning and incorporating play into the classroom.
The second point we touched on was incorporating maker culture into other subjects. And we kind of said this will make students become more engaged, just like it does in our English class, and participate more. And we used the evidence from Natasha Sacco's video about how art should be important because they stimulate ideas. And we said that it will create a hands-on environment in other classes. Whereas if you're sitting in a chemistry class listening to a lecture, if you actually get to participate, you'll actually learn more about it.
Our final point kind of touched on how maker culture incorporates all different types of learning on the Woven model, which we all know are written, oral, visual, electronic, and nonverbal. And since everyone learns very differently, this is the best way to incorporate all types of learning so that every individual can learn for the best way for them. It forces people to be more creative and think outside the box with the different styles of hands-on learning. An example we used was the girl who is really shy in her English class. If she dresses up and acts out as a character, then she can almost pretend that she's not herself, and she can be more free and less shy in character. Sacco said that the art of being human is being destroyed in the way that we're learning today, because everyone's learning the same way in a giant lecture hall. You're just sitting there for an hour, you're listening, and you're packing up and going. Some people have to study hours, 5 hours, 10 hours just to understand the material that was gone over in class. And if we can learn in a new way and promote different types of learning in that classroom, this will allow for everyone to have their own individual success.
Cool, thank you. All right, do we have questions? Let me hand this over to Adar. Would anybody like to start with the questions? Well, I will start. In your podcast, you talk about acting out Shakespeare in a class, right? And having that help you understand the Shakespeare better. Are there other examples that you can think of in which acting something out might help you learn something better?
Well, one example we actually used in my biology class, it was for the photosynthesis process. So my teacher he had, I think it was about 10 students come out, and it's a huge lecture hall. and they each kind of acted as their own like molecule or like protein. So he gave us each of the 10 students who went down like a card that each like the color represented whether they were like a protein or like an enzyme or another type of like particle, and he had them all kind of like move around as those particles would move in the photosynthesis way. So I guess that's another example in like a biology and science classroom.
Nice, so this has applications, routine application in biology, and you remember, do you remember what you did? Did you have a part?
I didn't have a part, but I remembered it a lot better once you had like all the students just like moving around because you could actually see it like we read about it, but it's kind of hard to like think about and imagine it, but having it like out there you could see it with your eyes, like what's actually happening, it actually helped a lot.
And I know another group discussed using, in 8th grade, they acted out their history battle scenes from like the Revolutionary War and stuff like that. And they still remembered how the British Army had to be organized and only throw the paper balls as they used them on command, whereas our army was just able to kind of be more, do whatever they wanted, and that was part of the deciding factor in the war.
Oh, that's a great example.
And to go along with Charlotte and Sean, like all throughout middle school, my English teachers would make us act out plays that we read from Shakespeare. So it was much easier to understand what was happening because Shakespeare can be a little bit difficult to understand. And also in high school, my English teachers would make us read the plays that we were reading in different voices to see how that would affect the
Oh,
play.
that's nice. Who else has a question? Go
We
ahead.
basically have the same question.
All right.
Okay, so you mentioned the issue of like that many teachers have in trying to just teach the lecture, and like you mentioned like trying to get the students to interact and implement maker culture that way. But most of your suggestions worked very well for smaller class sizes, while not working as well for like a lot of the lectures we have here can be up for like 200 students. Like for like the 200-person math lecture, how would you recommend implementing maker culture in the classroom?
I think the way Charlotte talked about how the professor called up like 10 students or whatever it was to the front of the classroom, I mean, that allows for the students that want to learn in this type of way to come up to the front of the classroom and do stuff like that. And I think it even allows for everyone watching because they can relate to the students and they, maybe they're friends with them or whatever. But it's more relatable and better, easier to understand for them. So I think that would be one way.
Oh, that's a great
Yeah,
answer.
I agree with Sean. Like in our chemistry class, we have maybe like 8 to 10 TAs. So if you like broke the whole class up into a group of like 10 students with each of the TAs, then you could perform some of the activities that we talked about.
I'll have one more question.
Right. You guys talked about how like you had in high school you had incorporated like play into your high school classroom settings. Have you ever like had any like doodling experience prior to this class? And like if so, like how did it like incorporate into like which class, and was it successful in that class for you specifically?
I haven't had like any like formal like, okay, sit down and doodle, but I know throughout all of high school I always doodled because I was always busy. But I think that it does help just because it keeps your mind active, whereas if you're gonna sit there and not do anything, you'll probably fall asleep, or at least I will. So like just to keep you engaged, doodling kind of helps.
All right, one more question then.
Regarding doodling again, so sometimes we filter out what we hear. So is it not possible that while doodling you eventually not stop paying attention to what's going on in the class? Or are you views about that?
It is possible, but I mean, it's also, I think, more likely that you're going to miss what's going on in class if you're not doodling and just completely zoned out. I think that at least engages some of your mind so that you can understand and incorporate some of the material.
Yeah, and there have been some studies done that actually have proven in a way that doodling does actually help you remember and focus better. I forget the person who wrote that study, but I know I looked it up when I did research for this project.
And from Linda Berry's syllabus that we've been running throughout class, she talks over and over again how she's been very successful in having students doodle during her class. So like Sean was saying, it is more beneficial than harmful.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Richards, for being first.